put it up later.
This meeting is being recorded.
The pitcher glances over, winds up and it's bunted down the third baseline. The suicide squeeze is on. Here he comes. Squeeze play. It's going to be close. Here's the throw. Here's the play at the plate. Holy cow! I think he's going to make it. R.I.P. Meatloaf, one of the greatest artists of this generation. But stop right there. For all the people who think Phil Rizzuto is only that person in that song, there's more to him than that. But right now it's football time. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait.
And I'm Joe Tufaro.
Welcome to divisional playoff weekend of On the Sports Lines. Now, we were going to do this earlier, but everyone said, let me sleep on it. So we gave you an answer in the morning, and it's 9 a.m. in the morning in California. So joining us again from his palatial estate, not sure if he's had his coffee yet, but if he has, good on him. Mr. Joe Tufaro is back. Good. Well, yeah, Jay, you don't have to show your coffee. This is about Joe right now. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, everyone.
He has something to plug. He has a role as a rules analyst, although I don't know if that's changed in the last 5 days. It's on a site on Twitter called Accountable Reps, and pay attention to that count. It's the same name on Twitter with the A, the word count, and the R capitalized. Tell us more about this, Joe.
Yeah, it's a kind of a marriage between a nerdy stats guy, not pictured here, and some officials that he's put together into a sort of a panel of officials so that we can dissect calls and no calls during games. And then what he figures out how it affects the winning percentage of each team. So the inadvertent whistle from the Cincinnati game, if they had called that back, how did that change the winning percentage of the Raiders or the Bengals? And so it's sort of as the game's going on, it shows how penalties, the Dallas game last week with all of their penalties, how it decreased their winning percentage as it goes along. And so I'm just when I see something, I say something. When I see something, I tweet him and say, that's a good call, or maybe that's a borderline call, or maybe there's a call that was missed. He has 3 or 4 of us that we go through it with. And then afterwards, we'll go back and answer some questions from fans. The actual rule from the NFL rulebook is most people, as we know, get college rules and NFL rules mistaken. The announcers have no clue what's going on. Tony Romo saying that's wrong. You can't do that. He's got to change that. No, we play by the rules, and that's how it works. So it's been pretty good. We got a lot of feedback for just doing it for a week. He just started it last weekend, and
Picked a good weekend to start it, Joe.
We even had some NFL players comment on what they thought was wrong with certain things, and then when we showed them the rule and told them what officials look for, they would then retweet it and stuff. We even got an AP reporter ask us why we thought one of the calls was incorrect, and so he's getting a lot of play out of it, and I just think it's bringing that whole other analytics people into the rules and kind of putting a bigger group together. So he's doing quite well.
And on one of the tweets that was tweeted out, they mentioned the fact that how we always hear the words "let players play" in the playoffs, and how much penalties affects a game during the regular season. That number is 36% in the regular season, 36.23% specifically, and in the playoffs, it's almost down to 20%. And then there's this chart of the impact of penalties on win probability. And guess which was a by far number one. That's how we start today's show, with the Dallas Cowboys not rising like a bat out of hell with their 23-17 loss to the San Francisco 49ers last Sunday. There are so many layers to this onion to peel. How were the refs during this game? What did people think about the last play? Why are the Cowboys an accident waiting to happen? Can I get more screenshots of sad Cowboy fans on the screen? I don't have the time for that right now. And
No, but Anthony will.
Anthony will always do it. And most importantly, the question,
Yeah, of course.
is Mike McCarthy on borrowed time right now?
No.
Joe, we'll answer that question. Don't give it a spoiler alert. Joe, we talked about the back and forth about refs this weekend, and a lot during this game specifically, especially with the Dak Prescott, oh, you're throwing his stuff at the refs. Well, good on them, which he cost him a nice little $25,000 for. Outside of the penalties, the most direct thing that people have been talking about was that last play specifically. What is the ref's responsibility in that last play to spot the ball?
Yeah, he had the umpire, or it could be the back judge. It depends on who's there at the time. And the umpire actually did a good job, because what he did was he went in. It's his job to spot the ball where the slide started, right? Because that's how it is in the NFL. It's not where he ends up. It's not where he tosses the ball forward to his center and says, put it down, because that's not the guy who gets to put the ball down. He should have turned and given it to the official, who was running up as quickly as he could from where that position is now, which is in the offensive backfield. So picture you start 12 yards back of the line of scrimmage, and the quarterback runs for 20 yards. Where are you, right? You're chasing from behind at all times, but not right away, because you have to watch for holding and watch for different things on the line of scrimmage. So he did a really good job, got up there. Prescott did the wrong thing by not handing him the ball. He puts the ball down, and if you notice, he moves it back a little bit, but then he goes out on the other side. He goes out on the defensive side to get out of the way. He didn't try to go back through the offensive lineman to get 10 yards back, which they normally do. He put it down, he got out of there, and then remember the rule, everyone's got to be set for 1 second. So at that point, by the time Prescott says one, so couldn't possibly, it's like in the NBA where they say you can only get a shot off, with
0.3 seconds is usually the Trent Tucker rule that was made back in the
If not, then the game's over. Because you can't possibly get a shot up in that point. So that was the same thing that happened earlier. It's just a matter of with the fake punt and then whatever they were doing after the fake punt. It's the same thing. You can't get that playoff unless there's 2 seconds on the clock, because you have to be set for 1. So the officials did nothing wrong in either case. Again, fans don't want the refs on the field at all. They want them to be out of the way. He made 3 mistakes on the play. He should have only run design of the play, because that's the clock, right? You have 14 seconds left. You can't run until it says 4 seconds. You can run until it says about 8 seconds. So run the 10 yards, take a knee instead of sliding, because you don't know because then you're going to be ahead of where the guy has to spot the ball. Take the knee, give yourself up, and either leave the ball sitting there, or again, pick it up and turn it to somebody, and try to get CeeDee Lamb to maybe jog a little quicker back to get set, so that he doesn't have to wait for him to get set, because that was the other thing that happened twice during the game, was his wide receivers decided to stroll back to the line. And then they would have been able to spike it and do what they wanted to accomplish, which I don't have a problem with the play. The execution. McCarthy did say it right at the end, and I was glad he said it right, was instead of the Hail Mary from the 40, wouldn't you like to have 4 verticals from the 25? You go, yes, or from the 30. Yes, I agree. But your quarterback can't look up and go, oh, I can get 5 more yards, and then slide and then hand the ball to the center. That's not going to work. So the execution of the play was awful, but the idea of the play was correct.
Yeah, the idea of the play definitely did. The only problem is, and I'm going to bring it to my point here, there were about 10 things, at least on the Cowboys side, that were coached wrong in this whole entire game. The penalties were ridiculous. I think I had seen a stat that Mike McCarthy's team had been penalized so much that it outgains 4 teams rushing yards during the season.
Penalties.
Yeah, they killed themselves at penalties. That execution of the play was wrong for Dak, basically trying to get as many yards as possible, not even thinking about running out of bounds. That's not an issue. That would have taken too much time. The way that ball was spotted, I think you had 11 guys up there, some making no effort, and one who has clueless on handing the ball to the ref. If you saw, there was this great, ESPN doesn't do a lot of stuff great, but there was this great montage of Larry Fitzgerald literally handing the ball to the ref and making sure that ball gets spotted down. Yeah. Now, I've heard all week that you need 14 seconds for that play, you need 16 seconds for that play, or you need 18 seconds for that play. It doesn't matter which one. It just matters on how you execute it. You probably could have done that in 14 seconds, but honestly, Mike McCarthy's incompetence in that game was shown. In this second half of the season, his time management has been terrible. I'm not saying that McCarthy is the wrong coach for this team, but I think Mike McCarthy needs to get a clue on how to be a modern head coach. And he's probably not going to lose his job because Jason Garrett survived there for 9 years, basically on a love relationship with Jerry Jones. But you have to wonder, even Kellen Moore is the new version of Jason Garrett, but talking about all this Dan Quinn stuff, maybe you have a better candidate in-house, because I don't know what Mike McCarthy really does with this team, because he doesn't really do anything positive in my opinion.
You're not the only Dallas fans you're not the only one who feels that way.
Don't call me a Dallas fan that says that.
What I meant to say was I've heard a lot of that from Dallas fans. I have a brother who's a Dallas fan. The fact that he hasn't been disowned all these years is amazing enough. But all right, here's my take on this. Okay, and first of all, the play call itself wasn't necessarily bad. As you guys noted, Mike McCarthy felt that one shot from inside the 30-yard line was better than two shots from the 41-yard line. Now, while I understand that thought, I would have thrown it. Tony Romo agreed with me when he said they should have taken a shot at the end zone, especially with the 49ers trying to guard the sidelines. And as you saw on the previous play, the Niners cornerbacks were very much playing to the boundary, trying to ensure that like any receiver could not get out of bounds. A quarterback draw with 14 seconds, it's risky. Most teams don't attempt that play with less than 20 seconds and no timeout since it's a middle of the field play. That said, I agree with you guys. The execution wasn't great. Dak sliding instead of going just down made it harder for the officials to figure out where the new line of scrimmage was. And that took precious seconds off the clock that Dallas could not afford to lose. And finally, those in Dallas who want to blame the official who put the ball down for costing them the chance to spike the ball, obviously, as Joe said, don't know the rule. The official has to place the ball. Dak just can't hand it to his center to get it snapped. Now, the referee crew maintained after the game that the umpire spotted the ball correctly, and I agree with that assessment. And it was a reasonable length of space away from where the play was taking place. And here's the quote from Alex Kemp, who was the referee in charge of the crew. The umpire collided with the players as he was setting the ball because he was moving it to the proper spot. Now, as you guys said, and I agree with you, if Dak had handed the ball to the umpire and waited for him to place it properly, then maybe he gets his chance to spike it and have one more play. Though, Joe, as you said, having to be set for 1 second before snapping it, maybe not. But he didn't. The final seconds, and that took the final seconds they had to spike the ball. And finally, while the whole sequence didn't go as planned, and I agree with Roma that, it was a missed opportunity on many levels, but that's par for the course with McCarthy. Dallas has no one to blame with themselves. They put themselves in their position with their utterly undisciplined play, 14 penalties for 89 yards, which is par for the course for the most penalized team in the NFL this season. And that is on McCarthy. Dallas also didn't look prepared for this game, and that's also on McCarthy. The final play was just a microcosm of that. Romo thought they'd have that one last second. They'll be able to clock this thing. They planned for it. Well, Dallas may have planned for it, but they sure as hell didn't look like they practiced it. Though even with all, and that is also on McCarthy. Though even with all that, I doubt, he gets fired, as surprising as that may seem to Cowboy Nation right now. Though with Jerry Jones, you never know. Look, we knew coming in that this was not a great matchup for the Cowboys, and Anthony laid it out on our last show as to why. The 49ers are built to run and stop the run. The Cowboys are built to pass and get after opposing passers. So this was not a strength-on-strength matchup. But Dallas got punched in the mouth by San Francisco early and often and didn't seem to have a clue as to how to respond. And that is on McCarthy. If Jimmy Garoppolo had even been slightly better than 16 of 25 for 172 yards, 6.88 per attempt, with no touchdowns and one pick for a 67.4 passer rating, this game might have been a blowout. As for the Cowboy fans throwing bottles and other things at the refs as they were leaving the field, way to channel your inner Philadelphia fandom, people. And Prescott praising them for doing so with that credit to them quote. Are y'all kidding me? Really? Prescott was rightfully fined those $25,000 by the NFL. And yeah, he did apologize, but I'm sorry, those comments have zero place in this game. You can be upset with how the game ended, but the refs are not to blame. The way the Cowboys played the game is why they lost.
And one of
Look,
the Before I was going to say, and one of the things that was also said on that website is this was a correct on Accountable Refs Twitter page. This was a correctly and rather consistently officiated game. There was nothing wrong with a lot of the calls, and none of them really were needed to explain. Anthony, go whichever route you want to go with.
Yeah, I agree with everyone on this panel. Obviously, the play call itself, I personally, as a head coach, wouldn't have called it because it'd be cutting it too close. And if you call that play, Dak Prescott, if you go back and watch that play, he looked like he was indecisive of when he was going to slide because he ran and kind of held, let up a little bit and then speed back up again and decide to slide. You got to get down a lot faster than that. I mean, get 5-7 yards, get down as quick as possible. And also, he knows the rules. I mean, he's been in the league long enough to know you have to hand the ball to the referee so he can spot the ball and you can eventually and can actually run another play. Think about this. The 49ers had a first down taken away from them that gave the Cowboys the ball back because Jimmy Garoppolo did not wait for Trent Williams to be set for a full second before he ran that quarterback scene. So the 49ers almost gave the game away as much as they tried, and the Cowboys still couldn't take advantage of it. Look, that whole game was a personification of the Cowboys season. And inside the NFL, I watched it earlier this week. They had some of the Cowboys, particularly Ezekiel Elliott, Mike for sound during the game. It was a whole lot of confusion on that sideline for most of the game between the fake snap and not getting the offense back on the field soon enough before they got a delay game. There were mixed up with the play signals, the play calling, even the stadium backfired on the Cowboys when you saw a receiver not being able to look into the sun to see if a pass is coming in his direction. And I think even Phil Sims pointed out, who spends $1 billion is building a stadium pointing east to west instead of north to south, when now you got the sun having to be a factor into a late afternoon game. But when you look at that play,
the ball in the sun would be an excuse for somewhere other than baseball.
Yeah, but when you look at that whole play in a nutshell, it was just. And I think about the Chase Claypool, and we talked about this last month. You gotta know the rules. You gotta get the ball to the referee as soon as possible and get lined up again. And look, the whole play calling with Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys have been an undisciplined team all season. They were 4 yards shy of leading the league in penalty yards. Only the Raiders actually got more penalty yards this season than the Dallas Cowboys. But 14 penalties, you think about some of the communication with play calling, Dak throwing an interception that led to a touchdown almost immediately afterwards. It was like just a buildup of one thing after another. And this is why people say the Cowboys are an accident waiting to happen on themselves. But I would throw this in. There was another factor in this whole Cowboys debacle. And this is why, okay? It's because Agatha had a part in all of this, okay? It was her fault.
I was saying
she put the idea in Kellen Moore's head. She told Dak Prescott not to slide sooner, and she killed Sparky as well. Okay, so it's all her fault. If you're a Cowboy fan, for what it's worth, if y'all blame somebody, at least blame a Marvel character that actually has the powers to manipulate everything. Other than the fact that your team is sorry, they've been up and down all season, and the whole game was a personification of this season. It looked good in spurts, and they look undisciplined and confused in another. So I don't know what's going to happen. Mike McCarthy, I think, would come back next season, but you got Kellen Moore kind of waiting in the rings, and he's already a head coaching candidate. Y'all wonder if Jerry Jones don't pull the plug just to keep Kellen Moore down the line from going somewhere else.
But you got to notice two things on that last play. First of all, 49ers called a timeout. So if nobody is in Dak's ear saying, make sure you go down at the 20, you make sure there's 10 seconds left when you take it. No one is in his ear. That's the failure there. And if you notice, Kellen Moore hasn't gotten an interview yet. Everybody else is interviewed. There haven't been any Kellen Moore interviews. So, and Dan Quinn's going. So, the idea that Kellen Moore was going to get 10 different interviews and Jerry Jones was going to have to make a decision. Oh, maybe I'll get rid of McCarthy and move in Kellen Moore, or give him a big raise or do something. That urgency may have been relieved by them being so bad that he can keep both of them now if he wants to. He still says, he said yesterday on his radio show, I'm not making any comments. I have a lot of decisions to make. on this coaching crew. So that's not exactly the huge endorsement that McCarthy was looking for.
Yeah, by the way, it's never a good sign when you have NFL pros mic for sound and 2/3 of the offense didn't even know the play call on that last play, because it looked pretty obvious that the receivers did not know that was going to be a quarterback sneak, and they needed to block upfield because you had CeeDee Lamb literally standing there for a few seconds before he realized that Prescott took off. So there was a lot of miscommunication going on in that last play, and you saw the end result.
I will say this, though, considering the ratings that Cowboys-Niners got on Sunday, and considering like the microscope that the Cowboys are always under, there's probably
and Nickelodeon, by the way.
Yes, and Nickelodeon. There's no bigger microscope out there for any head coaching job, maybe in the United States, than Cowboy head coach. And that's why Mike McCarthy not doing too well. But the Cowboys are out. God damn it. Thank God. Because we can talk about everything else. Let's look at all sides of the ball for the 4 divisional playoff round matchups. They say this is the best weekend on the NFL calendar. They say it's paradise by the television light. These matchups definitely rise to the occasion. Question for all of you to start off. We're going to start with Green Bay, San Francisco. It is now tied for the most common matchup in NFL playoff history. Wow. The two teams that are tied with it's in the same conference, but it's not the Niners or the Cowboys. It's not the Niners or the Packers. Anybody have a guess on what the most common divisional round matchup or the common playoff matchup is tied with?
In the NFC or just across the NFL, right?
It's across the NFL, but it's in the NFC.
Oh.
Was it Cowboys-49ers maybe?
Nope. Cowboys-49ers is not it. Cowboys-49ers is number 8.
And it's not Green Bay, San Francisco?
Well, Green Bay, San Francisco is now tied with.
Oh, okay. That wasn't clear.
Okay. Let's see. Wow.
I say you have to go back to the 70s to kind of understand why this is the answer.
Minnesota and somebody?
Well, it's there. It's going to be tough. I didn't even think of this beforehand.
Pittsburgh? Oh, no, they're in the
NFC.
Yeah, you ready?
Yeah.
How many?
Rams. Cowboys-Rams. They played each other in the 70s and then played each other 3 years ago. But that is the most common matchup.
Yeah, because they were a common opponent. Both of them made the Super Bowl against the Steelers in the 70s.
But they met 9 times, and now for the 9th time, it's the 49ers and the Packers. This is a rematch from week 3, where the Packers won 30-28 at the buzzer with a field goal in Santa Clara. And this is the 2nd straight year a champion from 2 years ago heads off to Lambeau in the divisional round. If you remember, Rams and Jared Goff were there a year ago. So, Jay, let's talk Packers offense behind the likely back-to-back MVP, Dr. Aaron Rodgers, and his merry band. He's getting some men back.
Yes. It's the captain obvious of keys, but it's where it starts and ends for the Packers offense. And that is, as you said, Aaron Rodgers. When the 49ers hosted the Packers in week 3, it took a 51-yard Mason Crosby field goal with zeros on the clock for the Pack to escape with a W after allowing Jimmy Garoppolo to drive the Niners 75 yards in 8 plays in 2:02 to take the lead. But, they left Rodgers for 37 seconds, and that was 35 seconds too many as he took the Packers from their own 25 to set up Crosby's game-winning kick. Rodgers threw downfield 3 times in that drive, targeting Davante Adams each time. Big surprise there. They connected twice for all 42 yards of the game-winning drive. In that game, Rodgers, 23 of 33. That's almost 70% completion percentage, 261 yards, averaged almost 8 per attempt. 2 scores, no picks, 113, 3 passer rating. He and Adams did what they've done for years, and in spite of every opponent knowing it's coming. Rodgers targeted Adams 18 times, connected with him for 12 for 132 yards in his score. It doesn't matter the coverage. The 49ers primarily play cover 1, which is man-to-man with 1 deep safety, and cover 4, which is a zone with 2 safeties in the middle of the field while the corners are taking the quarters of the field to their side. No secondary has been able to shut down the Rodgers to Adams connection. As head coach and play caller Matt LaFleur has done a hell of a job scheming Adams open despite constant safety shading and extra attention from opposing defenses. You give some credit to the Packers offensive line as well, despite missing first-team All-Pro David Bakhtiari at left tackle against a pass rush that would ultimately generate 48 sacks, led by Joey Bosa's 15.5. Rodgers was sacked just once, and the Packers were charged with just 6 pressures allowed and 38 pass blocking snaps. That is a 15.8% pressure rate allowed. 49ers defensive scheme is predicated on getting pressure with just a 4-man pass rush. They did that 24 times against Rodgers, recorded a quarterback pressure on only 4 of them. That's a 16.7% pressure rate allowed. The league average with a 4-man rush is 28.3. It also helped that LaFleur emphasized the quick passing game to offset that vaunted Bosa-led pass rush. Rodgers had 18 attempts that took less than the NFL standard of 2.5 seconds to release. Completed 16 of them. That's almost 89% for 140 yards, 8.8% and a touchdown. That quick passing game is likely going to be a large part of the offensive scheme this time as well. Again, as once again, Bakhtiari may not be available. He's listed as questionable. He did not practice on Thursday after limited reps on Wednesday. Now, LaFleur has said that he's been giving Bakhtiari a load management day since he came off IR. So it is possible that this is simply just his practice schedule. We'll see it come game time. Either way, I think Adams is going to do his usual damage. As I said, no matter the coverage, he'll beat it, though it may be tougher without Marquez Valdez-Scantling unavailable. He's listed as doubtful because of a back injury suffered against the Lions in Week 18, but all eyes, guys, are going to be on Rodgers. As good as he's been, and he's a first-ballot Hall of Famer with his 3 MVPs and possibly a 4th this season, as Rabbi alluded to, Rodgers' record in the postseason is only 11-9, and Green Bay has reached just 1 Super Bowl in 10 playoff appearances with him as its starter. He's thrown 13 interceptions in 745 attempts over those 20 playoff games. That's about 1 pick every 57 pass attempts. His regular season numbers, 1 pick almost every 77 pass attempts. And since he won the Super Bowl and MVP 11 years ago, the Pack are 0-4 in NFC Championship games, and a couple of those losses were ugly. And while Rodgers hasn't played badly in all of the losses, some of his picks came at the absolute worst time, and some of his touchdowns came way too late. The 49ers showed last week that they can make life hell for an opponent who, on paper, seemingly has the better talent. Aaron Rodgers needs to play like the MVP I said he should be on our January 8th show to give Green Bay a shot at ending their current 4-game losing streak in the NFC Championship game. Anything less and the rumors will start flying that his time in the frozen tundra may be over.
Are you going to repeat this again when they actually are in the NFC Championship game next week and not in the stupid divisional round? Just letting it out.
You both know, Rabbi, that 0-4 is
It does, but I think that number will be talked about a lot. I think that number will be talked a lot more next week. This has been a pretty good round historically for Aaron Rodgers, but yes, this is a lot. This is a nothing to win game for the.
No, and Rabbi, just keep this in mind. As long as the Packers remain in the playoffs, we are contractually obligated to say frozen tundra at least once a show.
By the way, Randall Cobb, very comfortable with him. Aaron Rodgers
He's going to need to step up, as will Aaron Jones.
He will, but he's back from injury for the first time since November. I'm very interested to see how Rodgers uses him tonight. All right, Joe. The defense has been a strength for the Packers for most of the second half of the season, but we've seen that unit fold like a cheap suit before in the playoffs in many different situations. Is that about to happen again?
I don't think so. I think it's funny because I was looking through some of the stats, which, I'm not a big stats guy, but it's funny because I think, Aaron Rodgers is one of the best things that happens to that defense because he's one of those 4 top quarterbacks where the other offense has to say, oh, we need to go for it on 4th down. We need to do this. We need to score more points. We need to take more chances. San Francisco kicked a lot of field goals last week and still almost lost that game by their quarterback. So I think, with Zadarius Smith back, with Whitney Mercilus back, it makes the middle of that defense even better. And, I was going through it, they're plus 13 in turnover ratio, which is usually a key. But the reason you're plus 13 in ratio for defense is because Aaron Rodgers only has 1 interception all year long. So, those type of stats kind of play both ways. And I think that, again, the pressure on the San Francisco offense to have to keep going, have to keep putting up points is going to be the key to this. And so they play a lot of soft zone. They play a lot of keep the guys in front of them, don't let up big plays, which is how they got beat by Tampa Bay last year by giving up a couple of big plays that they shouldn't have. King is gone, a couple of places back there, so the secondary is a little bit better than it was. But I think that's the key. You're going to have to watch for Kittle. You're going to have to watch for, Deebo Samuel, obviously. But having a little bit stronger up the middle with Merciless back and having a little bit extra pass rush and just shoring up that defense a little bit more. Again, they don't play a lot of man-to-man. They play a lot of zone, which can get them in trouble with guys like Kittle. But I do believe that they'll play a little bit stronger. And again, I think the pressure of the Packer offense on the 49ers will force some more turnovers, force some fourth downs, force some other things that'll hurt them a little bit instead of helping them. So, and again, I was just going through looking at the stats. Their offensive Packers are almost even with their defensive stats, meaning third down conversions. The Packers made 88 of 202. They gave up 87 of 203. So they're playing to their offense, but obviously the Packers offense scores more points and they get those turnovers because the Packers don't commit any turnovers. So I think the defense will step up and I think they'll look pretty good. And I agree with you. I think we'll be having the same conversation next week.
One thing that's funny is when Joe mentioned those 4 quarterbacks that you need to go for it on fourth down. I know 3 of them if the fourth one's Josh Allen, every one of them is in this round of the playoffs, which is scary. And all of them are in their own game. So, though this is scary and 2 of them are playing each other. We'll talk about that in a second. Anthony, 2 years ago in the NFC Championship, Jimmy Garoppolo, 6 for 8 for 77 yards against these Packers. And Deebo Samuel went for 89 all-purpose yards, but apparently Deebo Samuel was made in a laboratory over these last 2 years because he is not doing that again this week on this game coming up.
Well, here's the thing. By the way, tonight's forecast is tailor-made for the 49ers offense. Single-digit temperatures and wind chill below 0, and the 49ers run the football probably better and more diverse than any team in the league. With that being said, Mozart ran for over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. He's not playing tonight. Obviously, he's done for the year. But Elijah Mitchell has done a great job of kind of solidifying that backfield for the 49ers and giving Kyle Shanahan some options other than, he's a good receiver in the backfield also, but he has a good combination of speed that kind of mix things up with Deebo Samuel. It actually makes Samuel's ability to run the ball more effective on those end arounds that the 49ers found out last week after the interception. The 49ers averaged 4.5 yards a carry and 169 yards total against the Cowboys in that wild card game. So the fact that the Cowboys knew what the 49ers was going to do and was still not able to do that, to stop them, says a lot about how good the 49ers offense really is as far as running the football. I mentioned Samuel. He had 110 all-purpose yards, and including the 26-yard touchdown run that at least we thought put the game away as far as putting the Cowboys away. And it sets up a lot of the 49ers play action offense as well. Then you think about a strength against a weakness. The Packers' run defense is probably the weakest thing on this team, and they don't have many weaknesses. Obviously, they give up close to 5 yards a carry, which is third worst in the NFL. And Football Outsiders actually had their metrics ranked 29th among the teams as far as stopping the run. The thing, it's going to come down to Jimmy Garoppolo. And I wonder when he overthrew a wide open receiver last week and overthrew, which turned into an interception that set up a Cowboys touchdown late. I wonder how much that thumb is bothering him as far as being able to grip the football, being able to get a good tight spiral on his throws, because a lot of his passes, at least in the last couple of weeks, I'll go back to the Los Angeles Rams game also, his passes are sailing on him. And that generally has to do with either throwing off your back foot or because you have some kind of a thumb or finger injury that's not allowing you to grip the football the way you would if you was normally healthy and throwing the ball. So the key is going to be the 49ers offense, run the ball 30 to 40 times. You want to keep Aaron Rodgers' offense off the field anyway, as much as possible. But Jimmy Garoppolo has got to avoid the timely mistake. I think that's been the biggest thing about Garoppolo, is that pick your spots where you want to take your shots downfield, but you have to limit the mistakes. You cannot turn the ball over at the worst possible time. You don't want to give Aaron Rodgers and that explosive pack offense a short field of any kind. And this is a game that's tailor-made for the 49ers to go in and pull the upset. It's going to be cold. It's going to be the weather's going to be a bit of a factor. You're going to run the ball. You want to shorten the game as much as possible. You want to keep Aaron Rodgers' offense off the field as much as possible. It's just going to come down to not turn the ball over and even playing the field position game if you have to, because as good as the 49ers defense is, and by the way, Bosa did clear concussion protocol, so he will play, and I'm going to see Rabbi would get more into that.
Or you can just get into it right now, mentioning Nick Bosa's injuries if you want to.
Yeah, but I don't want to take too much of the TV time away from such a handsome young face and a fellow Hofstra alum.
Damn right.
So I'll let you sum it up pretty much.
I will sum this up though. Jimmy Garoppolo, fourth quarter of his 4 playoff starts for the Niners in 2020 and 2022. 9 for 20, 93 yards, 2 INTs, a 19.4 rating, lowest fourth quarter playoff rating for anybody who started multiple games in 30 years.
Yeah, Rabbi, I saw that stat too. But I mean, here's the thing that I'm going to be watching for. Jimmy Garoppolo has gotten so much disrespect this season for what he does not do on the field. And yeah, people who feel that way about him will point to that stat among others. But I think he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. He's a little pissed off about how much disrespect he's getting. And stats are in a vacuum. You can make them say whatever you want. And that's coming from the show's resident stat king. Just remember, I go back to this stat, and I've said this on the show before, with Jimmy Garoppolo under center, executing Shanahan's offense the way he does. The San Francisco offense plays like a top 5 offense. Not that he's a top 5 quarterback, but he executes that offense like a top 5 offense. And as Anthony said, they're going into a situation that's kind of tailor-made for him. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
And I think I've heard this stat. He's either undefeated with 1 loss when he doesn't throw a touchdown, which is an insane stat. That means he really is executing the offense to his best. San Francisco's defense is, though, one of the main reasons why they're here right now. They were basically living rent-free in the Cowboy backfield for about 3 quarters last week. And their last 7 weeks has been incredible. 29 sacks, a 43.2% pressure percentage, and in the last 7 games, they've had 3+ sacks. Anthony mentioned Bosa, 5 sacks during that stretch, 10 quarterback hits, 33 pressures. He cleared concussion protocol, so he's going to be at his best tonight. Eric Armstead, 5 sacks last 7 games, 28 pressures, 11 quarterback hits. Green Bay has just allowed 33 sacks and 175 pressures, but the 49ers have an 8.1% sack percentage this year. So that offensive line is going to be tough. And I think the one thing that makes the Packers go, I don't know if we've talked too much about, is the law firm of Jones and Dillon in the backfield, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. That's a 49er run defense that has only allowed 4 yards a carry at 103.5 yards a game. And for the last 6 games, that number is down to 77.5 yards a game. There's only 6 teams that's allowed under 4 yards a carry, and the Niners are one of them. But the way that running game is probably going to be the biggest key tonight, because if they can neutralize it, I don't want to say that a guy with 5 interceptions on the year can be forced into mistakes, but I think Aaron Rodgers can be forced into mistakes. He's basically hasn't played for 2 weeks, for 13 days, and he only played 1 half of the Lions game. So you're going to get a lot of rust at the beginning. I wouldn't be surprised if San Francisco led this game early, which will allow at least San Francisco to do what they want to do. The question is, can Green Bay get this game in the 30s? If Green Bay can get this game in the 30s, done deal. And I don't think the weather is going to be as much of a factor of it being a running game. We saw what Buffalo did last week. They were able to execute their offense despite it being a negative 6-degree wind chill in Buffalo. It's either going to be a very interesting game or it's going to be a blowout. I personally think that the Niners are going to run out of gas here, but we'll see. There's a lot of ways this game can go, and I've realized that throughout the week. All right.
Yep.
The other NFC matchup, it is a doozy. The It's Tom Brady and the defending champion Tampa Bay Bucks, even though against the Los Angeles Rams, even though one of Tom Brady's 7 rings, no offense to Ariana Grande, was won against Sean McVay's Rams, the Rams have put 2 of the 9 L's on Brady's record over the last 2 years in Tampa, and that includes a 34-24 win this year in week 3. The scene also switches from the warm confines of Los Angeles in that matchup to the warm confines of Tampa Bay in that matchup. Poor babies, it's really just the frozen tundra of Raymond James Stadium. Anthony, who is left for this Bucs offense to outshine against the Rams?
Well, I would say this: both stadiums have had a weather delay at some point since their inception. I'll never get over an indoor stadium having a weather delay, but we've actually had that. It's the microcosm of 2 years as far as living on planet Earth. Look, I go back to that. By the way, 22 years to the day that the Rams and the Buccaneers played in that classic
the Burt Manuel game.
Championship game. Yes, the Burt Manuel rule. So happy anniversary to Burt Manuel if he's out there somewhere watching this. However, I go back to that week 3 matchup, and Tristan Wirfs' injury is such a big deal because he washes Tom Brady's, I think, blind side. He's on the left or the right side. And you have Aaron Donald and Von Miller has bookends. Look, the Tampa Bay gonna have to play up-tempo offense. I think Tom Brady's offense in Tampa works best when they play up-tempo. When you go back to that last matchup, they were down 21-7, and Tom Brady ended up with over 300 yards. So the offense ended up with 446 total yards in that game, but they fell behind by 2 touchdowns before they kind of cranked things up. Now, look, there's no Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown's somewhat making another mixtape. Who knows? But you still have Mike Evans. He was able to get 110 yards receiving in that game. And you think about the Rams' offense, for as good as the front 7 is, they play a lot of zone. And because there's only one Jalen Ramsey to go around in that secondary. So there are chances and opportunities for Tampa Bay to get some shots downfield. As far as Brady's quick snaps, and this is a stat I looked up. 28 of Brady's 55 passes in the theme of 2021. There were 2.5 seconds. That is a sign of either a quick hurdle or you don't have a great offensive line. If you follow Eli Manning's final years with the Giants to kind of figure that one out, but 25 of those 221 passes as far as this season went for 432 yards. So I think when you have an offensive line that's banged up and you have a quick pass rush, playing up tempo to even start the game out, and even Bruce Arians has said they've gone to the offense this year to kind of gain some momentum, some traction. I can see Tampa trying to go to that early and often just to kind of mix things up and keep those defensive pass rush of the Rams honest. I mean, keep them on the field because, nothing negates a pass rush than a tired defensive line that can't get off the field to get any rest. And Tampa Bay really don't have the weapons that they had in that week 3 match. Think about this. The Rams are able to hit Tom Brady and sack him 3 times and that was before they got Von Miller. And so this is a big challenge, especially when you have your best offensive lineman injured and it's still questionable. Even if he plays, it's a high ankle sprain. You don't know how effective he's going to be. So I can see the Bucs going to a more up-tempo offense, Brady going to more quick passes, taking advantage of the Rams playing more zone, a lot more zone coverage than they normally do. And that's tailor-made for a quick offense. You just find a soft spot, lay there, and wait for the pass. So it's going to be up to Tom Brady and how he can execute it and get the ball out of his hands quickly as possible. If he has to hold the ball for more than 3 seconds, he's screwed because that line is not going to hold up with those pass rushes coming at him. The Eagles, after Risk went down last week, was able to get to Tom Brady 3 times after the fact. So that kind of tells you the Eagles without the great pass rushes, the Rams are able to get to Tom Brady. The Rams are a little better, a little different in that regard. So Tom Brady is going to have to get the ball out quick, fast as possible, keep the chains moving, play ahead of the first down markers,
Yeah,
and keep the Rams off balance.
I think there's a lot that. By the way, you did not mention playoff Lenny. I have to mention Leonard Fournette, who's probably going to be back for this game. He was really the Bucs MVP this season because that's the guy that makes sure you don't have to have the ball for 3 seconds in your hand. Dump it off to Fournette and see what he can do. Even Giovanni Bernard and random guy letter Y, who I don't actually remember his name, nor do I need to, because the Bucs have a scheme that you could pretty much put anybody back there, helped out last week. And I'm very curious to see if Fournette has any real impact in this game. And I think he will. Okay.
Yeah, by the way, it would be nice if they throw in a few more screens because the Bucs don't screen passes. That would be great to offset the pass rush also.
There's a big difference between Leonard Fournette and the combination of Keyshawn Vaughn, found his name, and Giovanni Bernard, who, again, I didn't even know was still in the league until I watched that game from front to back. So now we have the other side of the ball. And while everybody's talking about who the Bucs don't have on offense, how about who the Bucs have gotten back on defense? Now, they're still missing one of their starting quarterbacks, and their cornerbacks are still kind of an iffy situation in Jamel Dean. You got Jamel Dean back, but you still have a bunch of injuries, including Sean Murphy bunting in the backfield. But you have linebackers who know how to pressure. You have Shaq Barrett, you have Jason Pierre-Paul, and you have Levante David. Now, Pierre-Paul and David were both on kind of a pitch count last week, but they still just destroyed Jalen Hurts. Now, I know Jalen Hurts isn't really your definition of an NFL quarterback, in my opinion, but you saw Barrett tipping a ball and making sure and intercepting Hurts and returning it 17 yards. You saw them set up Brady to have a short field a lot of the time. You saw Shaq Barrett basically going into a fire zone coverage in the middle of the field, disguising. And what the Bucs did last year was a little bit of Tom Brady, but a lot of that defense, the defensive pressure in this round last year against the Saints, who the Bucs never beat, apparently, except in the playoffs where it matters, intercepted Breeze a bunch of times. And again, gave Brady a short field. If you give Brady a 40-yard field more than 2 times a game, I have news for you. You're going to lose. That's pretty much plain and simple. And that's what the Bucs are going to need to do in this game. Now, we'll talk about it in a second. Jay will talk about Matthew Stafford has been prone to mistakes all year, especially the second half of the season. This game against Arizona was good, but I know that if the Bucs are going to win this game, they're going to need to make the interceptions at the right time, and that starts with the pressure up front. And Jay, we could talk all day about Matthew Stafford. He looked great in that game against the Cardinals. He finally got the monkey off of his back. It's not the freaking Steve Young monkey that the ESPN was saying. You're one playoff game against the Cardinals at your home stadium on a Monday night playoff game that a lot of people just watch the Manning cast for. What are you going to see what do you want to see from the Rams offense in this game?
Well, I mean, the key for the Rams offense is pretty straightforward, and it's the one I've been talking about for the last 2 shows. It is, as you alluded to, Rabbi, all about Matthew Stafford playing efficient and, most importantly, clean football as the guy piloting Sean McVay's offensive scheme, especially against a Bucs defense that leads the NFL in blitz rate at 40.8%. Now, how Stafford performs in those situations will be kind of a key within a key, especially with 4-time Pro Bowl left tackle Andrew Whitworth, his blindside protector and the 3rd best offensive tackle in terms of pass block win rate at 94%, being ruled out for the game due to the knee and ankle injury he sustained last week. Stafford played cleanly and efficiently in the Rams' 34-11 wild card win over the NFC West rival Cardinals. He was 13 of 17. That's it, just 17 attempts, 76.5%. 3 of his incompletions were clear drops, only 202 yards, but he averaged a tick under 12 yards per attempt, 2 scores, 0 picks, and a 154.5 passer rating. 153.8 is perfect. Arizona blitzed him on a season high 50% of his dropbacks, but Stafford went 7 of 9 for 148 yards and a touchdown in those situations. Stafford also carried 6 times for 22 yards and a rushing TD, accounting for all 3 Los Angeles touchdowns. You alluded a little bit, Rabbi, to that week 3 win of the Rams over the Bucs. Stafford was 27 of 38, 71%, 343 yards, 9 per attempt, 4 scores, 0 picks, a 134 passer rating. It was one of his best regular season games. He was sacked just once, was pressured only 10 times, despite being blitzed at a 30% rate. He went 9 of 11 for 91 yards and a score against the Tampa Bay Blitz, getting the ball out at a ridiculous 1.88 seconds per throw. Remember, guys, the NFL baseline is 2.5. It actually shouldn't surprise anyone that Stafford's had little trouble with handling defenses that are prone to blitzing. In the regular season, he posted the best expected points added per throw against the blitz in the NFL. He was second in completion percentage, 74.6 against the blitz, and third in yards per attempt, 9.6 against the blitz. For that reason, teams have blitzed him on just 24.8% of his passes, which is the second lowest blitz rate in the NFL. And interestingly enough, guys, it's just ahead of Tom Brady at number 3, who was blitzed at 24.9%. It helped the offense plenty that running back Cam Akers was back on the field and combined with Sony Michel to help the Rams grind out 140 yards on the ground against the Cardinals. Akers had 95 total yards from scrimmage, 55 rushing on 17 carries, 1 catch for 40 yards on some trickeration that had Odell Beckham Jr. throwing him the ball. And Akers showed the cuts and explosiveness as well as the physicality through contact that we were used to seeing from him prior to tearing his Achilles. Guys, just remember this. It's only been less than 6 months since he's had the surgery. The dynamic that Akers brings with his skill set alongside Michel gives the Rams complementary layers in the running game. You add that to the usual McVay mixture of straight drop back and play action with smartly taken outlet plays and then selectively picking their spots for big plays to Cooper Kupp and OBJ. I wasn't going to forget about him, Anthony, in the passing game. And you couple that with Stafford continuing to make solid decisions, especially against the blitz, with none of that forced hero ball throwing into unfavorable coverage when the pocket breaks down that he was prone to in the 3 games prior to the wild card win, and doing it behind an offensive line that led the NFL in pass block win rate at 68%. And you have the offense that had me picking the Rams to rep the NFC in the Super Bowl way back in September on our NFL kickoff show.
So 2 things. Number 1, me and Joe actually had this conspiracy theory. First of all, Odell Beckham got drug tested this week because of his performances, and ODB and OBJ basically posted it on Twitter. Great comeback for him. He's doing very well as the second option in this offense. It'll be Tufaro. Number 2, 89.2 expected yards, expected points added for Stafford this season on the blitz. That is the most ever in the next gen stats era, which is insane. And number 3, me and Joe have this theory that Cam Akers has been hot dogging it all year. They've been saving him for this stretch run right here. So, and I'm going to add it so he doesn't look like Todd Gurley did in the Super Bowl 53 season. But Akers has been a revelation for them, and I'm curious to see how he does in this game. All right, Joe. There might as well have been an open door policy for the Rams Monday night while you were watching them destroy the Cardinals. Tom Brady, can the Rams defense make Tom Brady end up the same way Kyler Murray did, minus the scaredness of actually playing a playoff game, not even able to know where the hell he is?
Yeah. And it's not an indoor stadium, by the way. There's a big open side to it.
It was basically what we call the Olay offense. It's the Olay, come on through, I'm going to say.
They were all, that was, I was hoping game to go and watch. It was interesting to see the new stadium. My first time there. And it's kind of funny because they have an upper section that's above the scoreboard. So you really can't do anything, but you feel like you're just watching TV. So you feel like you're standing there watching television. So you have to kind of force yourself to look down. And then they have all of these rails and cocktail tables where you can stand on the 400 level. So nobody actually goes to their seats at the 500 level. They stand on the 400 level like we would do and go get cocktails and stuff and then stand at the rail. And again, try not to watch television. Try to watch what's actually going on in the field. It's very distracting, to say the least. It's the biggest thing I've ever seen. But it's very clear and it's a very nice. I did enjoy my trip there. The game was just awful. As you guys know, I traveled with one of the guys who's on the chain gang, so we couldn't even leave early. We had to wait for an hour after the game to get a ride home. So there was no leaving early. There was no just shaking your head and walking out. There were a lot of Cardinals fans there. It was interesting. But the way that Rams defense played, and when you look at what's going on with the Bucs, with losing Wirfs, and as Anthony said, you can stick him in there this week, but he's not himself, and he probably, if there's a chance he could be out by the first quarter if he gets knocked around. The guy that they have behind him was worse than they wanted to put Wirfs back in with a bad ankle. That tells you how bad this backup was, and that the Rams are smart, that they're going to put two guys on that side. They're going to run stunts over there. They're going to make him move. They're going to make Wirfs do as much as they can to get him out of that game, make him feel uncomfortable. And as all Giants fans know, there's one thing you can do to Tom Brady, and that's put pressure on him up the middle and from the sides. And that's going to, not that it never confuses him. It just makes him feel uncomfortable, makes him get rid of the ball. Now, in the second Super Bowl the Giants played, there's a point in the third quarter where Justin Tuck comes over and he goes, hey, if he's going to throw it that fast, we have no chance. So your guys are exactly right. That's what Brady's going to try to do, is try to get rid of this ball as quick as possible. But you would also hope that the Rams would be smart on the back end and play a little tighter coverage, because he's not going to be able to yards down the field. He's not going to have the time. So that's how you complement that pressure up front, is by playing a little bit tighter on the back. They are very good, this Rams team. They certainly didn't miss a step the other night, and I was fairly impressed with what they did. And they did make Kyler, from the first play, they made Kyler Murray look bad. For a guy who's a mobile quarterback to get sacked on the first play of the game and not even be able to run the ball effectively, except maybe he had 2 long runs all night where he escaped the pocket. You can imagine, when they know where somebody's standing, how good this team can be up front, and how much pressure they can put on him. The only thing that I get, and again, I guess this kind of goes back, like I said to you on the last, they're only +2 in turnover ratio, which seems amazing. That Jalen Ramsey has a lot of interceptions, and they force some fumbles, but they're only +2. But that goes back to their offense turning the ball over a lot.
It's all Stafford.
It goes back to Stafford having that bad section of week. And it was funny. I talked to gentleman I was standing next to, about OBJ, because I said, look, I'm a Giants fan. So we started talking about him. I said, the fact that Woods got hurt the first week he got there gave McVay the chance to walk up to him and go, okay, you have to be that guy. You have to block. You have to be the second option. There was even a section at the end of the game where he started to run out on the field, and they sent out other receivers and kept him on the sideline. And in the old days, the helmet, if he would have walked around, he would have been making a big deal. He started to go out, he got pulled back, he kind of shrugged his shoulders and just stood there. And I think he's become more of a team player because the team is winning, because the pressure's not on him.
Winning solves is the cure to all
ill.
As much as he tries to get, as much as he wants to get the spotlight put on him, he knows in this place, the spotlight will be on him when he finally wins. And if they go all the way and he's part of that, I think he's finally realized that that's going to get him more recognition than being the person he was in New York or being the person he was in Cleveland. Because don't forget, off the field, behind the scenes, he's a great kid. His family's fantastic. He was very nice to Kim Jones when she was sick. He's a very wholesome person. He's a really good guy. It's just he's got this thing in his head that I have to get noticed. I have to get noticed. I have to get noticed. And it was always for what clearly were the wrong reasons before. And so I think he's transformed. I think he's transformed this team. Ran into his mom. They're great. They're really having a good time out there. And I think that whole thing is come a long way. But I think that this Rams defense, if you can get Wirfs out of the game, man, it's going to change the world for Tampa Bay. And again, you try to make it one-dimensional, but we'll see how their offense does, because as we all know, like you said, if it goes bad for Stafford and they don't have to put up the 4 quarterbacks that you have to outscore, we'll see how it goes. But again, the Rams found their running game again last week.
Yeah,
I'm not sure you're going to be able to run that easily against that Tampa Bay defense. So we'll see what plan they come up with. But I think this is a really good game, and I think the Rams come out of it and go to and host. Oh no, they'd have to go to Green Bay. I
You
guess
have to go to Green Bay, but I
Bay.
think.
Hey, Rabbi,
Or they would host San Francisco, right?
Yeah. A quick comment about what Joe said about OBJ. I think another thing that like we should kind of like keep in mind is that for the first time in his career, think about this. He's in a scheme that actually plays to his strengths. He wasn't, and he finally, that's kind of important. This is an offense that actually he fits well into. The offenses that he was playing in, yeah, he was the featured guy with the Giants, but it wasn't that type of an explosive offense. And we all know the pitfalls with the Cleveland offense with that. He's in a good place in terms of in an offensive fit. And I got to tell you, Joe, you're right about the defense. This is the first time all year that I've seen the Rams defense be the reason that the team won. They were the side of the ball that punched the opponent in the mouth and didn't let him get back up. And if they can do that to Brady, then as long as Stafford plays clean, you're right. They're going to Green Bay.
Yeah. And by the way, OBJ's maturation does go a long way. By the way, he posts on IG he's going to be a father as well. So I think that plays into it as well. But isn't it nice to see Sean McVay admit that he stole a player from the Ben McAdoo-led Giants as far as using OBJ as a quarterback?
You're talking about the new Carolina offensive coordinator there. Yeah, so
Right.
Here's the thing about OBJ, and I think we've seen this outside of Antonio Brown. We've seen this from a lot of good wide receivers. And Jay, a lot of wide receivers fit well in McVay's scheme because it's run, and I'll have someone who can get you the ball in Matthew Stafford.
Hey, he almost resurrected Deshaun Jackson.
He did because everybody can fit in that offense. But you've seen it with Randy Moss on how he changed when he went to the Patriots because that's a scheme that was winning. You've seen that with T.O. when he was with the Eagles and then with the Cowboys because that was schemes that was winning. You have quarterbacks that catered to them. OBJ will probably go crazy again, but you're in a good pocket right now for him.
And the offense doesn't cater to him.
It doesn't cater to him, but you can throw to him in a great spot.
They're not trying to fight. They're not trying to force it to him because he's not acting up during the week and it's not in the press and they're not getting questions every week of why aren't you throwing to him? Hey, if he gets 3 or 4 targets, nobody in LA is asking why he's only getting 3 or 4 targets as long as they're winning the game. And then I watched him on a few plays. He's blocking downfield. He's blocking during run plays. He used to play patty cake with the guy. Had an agreement like, I'm not going to touch, we'll just stand here and let them play over there. He's actually going out and blocking and doing things. And again, being part of the team, which is something that he needed to do. So we're all happy to see it, I'm sure.
All right, let's move on to the AFC. So in the NFC, the average age of the QBs remaining is 36. In the AFC, that average age goes down almost a decade to 27. Youth is served, especially with NFL sophomore Joe Burrow and his Cincinnati Bengals. In this round, for the first time since, me and Anthony were 6 years old, going up against the Tennessee Titans. And the Tennessee Titans, believe it or not, are looking for a third playoff win in the Ryan Tannehill administration. They've been in the playoffs for the last 3 years. And if you think this matchup is weak and boring, well, 2 out of 3 of the matchups we've previewed so far ain't bad. Okay, let's start with the Titans, Joe. Derrick Henry has been activated. He's going to start, and he is not on a pitch count. Of course, they're playing in a playoff game. Why would your best star be on a pitch count? Stupid question there. Does their success depend on Derrick Henry?
Oh, it depends on that whole offense finally being together. And now Ryan Tannehill not having to be more than what Ryan Tannehill is. And that's, even though he's performed well, he's actually did pick up the slack during the end of the season. I think having Derrick Henry in there, I think having Julio Jones healthy, I think having the other wide receivers back, I think this themselves on offense, and that they don't have to reinvent anything here. They don't have to figure out a way around Henry not being there, even though the other guys who were there stepped up. He's obviously a difference maker. And now you have a rotation you can go to. Since the other guys were fine, you now have this rotation that even if he was on a pitch count for a series here and there, or whatever, however you do it, you're fine. You're not gonna suffer too much. So I think the biggest thing here is, again, allowing Tannehill to do what he does well, which is manage the game, control the game, do whatever it is. If he throws the ball 13 times, that's fine as long as they're able to do what they can do. But he does have big possession receiver back in Julio Jones. He's got guys healthy. This offense is now the healthiest in long. Everyone is back. Everyone is in their spot. Everybody is where they're supposed to be. And I think that helps them a ton to be able to do what they're supposed to do. And then it leaves it up to the other side of the ball to see if they can stop Cincinnati. But we'll get into that as we go around the room here. But I think the Titans now, that's not a liability anymore, their offense, when everybody's healthy and Derrick Henry's back. And again, Tannehill returns to what Tannehill was the last couple of years, which is do what you do, don't make any mistakes, throw it when you have to. You have some big guys in there. I don't know if it's the Tennessee uniforms or if it's their players, but that looks like the biggest team. Everyone looks like a monster on a team. It must be the uniforms.
It's Vrabel. I feel like it's all Vrabel in that situation.
Everybody is huge. All the tight ends, all the wide receivers, they all look like monsters, like they want to run you over. So I think that helps Tannehill, though, because he's more of a throw it to a guy looking back at you than he is throwing downfield or leading anybody down the field. So I think that's where Julio Jones fits in there perfectly. He's another look back at the quarterback guy. Very good against zone defenses, those things. So I think they're in a really good spot here to play their game, to control the ball, to keep the ball. Again, Joe Burrow is not one of those top four guys, but you do want to keep the ball away from that offense as much as you can. Again, you can control the game more on offense when you have Derrick Henry and a couple of these other guys back that are
Yeah, Joe Burrow reminds me a lot of Brett Favre in his young days and his I'm either going, well, I'll talk about it in a second, and is I'm either going to throw a touchdown against you or not. By the way, did any team benefit from that bye week more than the Tennessee Titans, allowing them to get tremendously healthy and kind of be in a good position in this game coming up in about 3 hours? All right, Jay, the defense is underrated for this team. And it's led by the only successful Belichick disciple. And the reason why he's a successful Belichick disciple is he just played under Belichick and didn't actually coach under Belichick. So
that's right.
What's the deal for the Titans to handle my boy Joe Cool?
Before I get into that, the guy that Joe was alluding to who was substituting for Derrick Henry was Donta Foreman, and Foreman had 3 100-yard games in the last 6 weeks. So
the one thing about Foreman, though, is interesting. It does show what the system is. Foreman is a bowling ball. He doesn't necessarily have the ability of Derrick Henry, but Donta Foreman is a bowling ball that can get you 10 yards and keep the chains moving. I'm very interested to see how he does as a secondary back today.
Yep, agreed. But getting back to the Titans defense, it's been its best this season when they've been able to get pressure on quarterbacks with just a 4-man rush. Being able to do that against Joe Burrow will be the key on that side of the ball for Tennessee. And they're going against a Bengals offensive line that has struggled to keep Burrow upright this season. Burrow doesn't necessarily face as much pressure as other quarterbacks, but when he does, he gets sacked a lot, 51 times the most in the NFL. That 4-man pass rush is how they routed the Chiefs 27-3 in week 7, pulled out a 34-31 win against the Bills in week 8, and shook off the loss of Henry to that injury with a broken bone in his foot to beat the Rams 28-16 on the road in week 9. With defensive tackle Jeff Simmons inside, linebackers Harold Landry and my old pal Bud Dupree outside, and defensive end Danico Autry from pretty much everywhere, the Titans have one of the most potent pass rushing foursomes in the NFL. Those 4 guys combined for 32.5 of the Titans' 43 sacks in the NFL, 43 sacks this season, which was 9th in the NFL. Landry had 12, Autry 9, Simmons 8.5. Those 3 give the Titans the only team in the NFL with 3 players with 8 or more sacks. Add in Dupree, who had 3 to that trio. He's coming off knee surgery and has dealt with some other injuries this season, but he's looked more explosive of late. And you know why offensive line coaches have a nightmare or 2 when the Titans are on the schedule. Being the most sacked quarterback in the NFL hasn't stopped Burrow from becoming one of the best in just his second season. Shutting down Jamar Chase and company will be a challenge for the Titans secondary. So getting to Burrow often and getting him down often enough will be critical. Henry's not the only Titan returning to the lineup and or form just in time for the matchup against against the Bengals, as Rabbi alluded to. Linebacker David Long Jr. is back after being out weeks 10 through 16 with a hamstring. He gives the defense a high-energy player who can affect the game in both coverage as a blitzer and definitively against the run. He seems to rise to the occasion in big games. He had 13 tackles against the Bills and a game-changing pick against the Rams, and he's formed an effective tandem of late with Zach Cunningham. There was some midweek concern about starting cornerback Janoris Jenkins, who tweaked an ankle during practice and didn't participate on Wednesday. He was a full participant on Thursday, and he has no injury designation for the game. Jenkins, cornerback one Christian Fulton, all-pro safety Kevin Byard, and his partner, safety Amani Hooker, give the Titans their best foursome in the defensive backfield and their best chance against the Bengals' explosive passing attack. The Titans' defense has improved tremendously as the season's progressed, going from allowing 384 yards and 26.8 points per game in the first 6 weeks to just a tick over 300 yards and 17.5 points per game over the final 11. The Titans are 7th in the NFL in red zone defense. They only allow touchdown conversions on 51.7%, and they're going against a Bengals team that is only 17th in the NFL in red zone offense at 59.6. The entire Titans defense needs to have their A game in order to beat the Bengals, but it all starts with that four-man pass rush.
Yeah, I agree. This is going to be a very interesting matchup of the Titans defense versus the Bengals offense, and it'll determine, again, what type of game this is, whether it be 23-20 or for the Bengals to win probably 38-35. Speaking of, Joe Burrow was 25. He's not that much of a baby, but you got 21-year-old Jamar Chase as your leading wide receiver, who is a top 5 wide receiver right now as a rookie. And that is the seventh best offense in the NFL this year. And you saw Chase made play after play last week. It's like nothing could stop that team. And they were 4-4 in the second half on scoring drives in that game. Obviously, you had that erroneous whistle during that play in the second quarter. Whatever happened. The Raiders still couldn't stop it. It was a very good throw by Burrow to get that. You saw Montana to Clark-like vibes on the first touchdown last week in a play that almost looked like the catch. And the Bengals offense is really, really good. They're also, again, dependent on the big play, almost too dependent sometimes. Burrow threw 15 touchdown passes of 30 yards or more in 17 games last year. Tom Brady, for instance, had 8. And the man who you would think would always lead the league in that, Patrick Mahomes, had just 7. Burrow did deep damage, even when there wasn't touchdowns, 40-plus yard completions, 15, 20-plus yard completions, 60. You have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, who is a first, second-round pick from last year, Tyler Boyd, CJ Uzomah, who has been a very big presence, especially inside the 10-yard line. He is a very good goal-to-go target. And you're wondering, as long as the Bengals can kind of, as Jay said, the Titans don't blitz a lot. They stunt a ton, though. If you can kind of solve that and allow Burrow to have time to throw. I remember Dan Orlovsky said at the beginning of the season, this is one of the worst offensive lines that he's ever seen. Hasn't gotten too much better, but Joe Burrow has gotten much better, and playing a 17-game season without injury has also helped that a lot. Only 14 interceptions. Burrow's not going to make too many mistakes. However, I think the one thing that the Bengals need to realize is they're going to have to score to win this game. And even if it becomes a which team has the ball last, they have to get Joe Mixon a lot of touches, because Joe Mixon yards means longer drives. Longer drives means less time for Derrick Henry on the field. And the most dangerous weapon possibly left in the rest of these playoffs is Derrick Henry. So strength on strength today. Titans defense, Bengals offense. If the Bengals offense can at least hold that to a draw, I think the Bengals have a shot here. Okay. Anthony, the Bengals defense kept the Raiders from 7s and made them have 3s in 4 out of 5 red zone trips last week. And then the last one obviously was incomplete inside the 10-yard line. They're going to need more than that, though, against the Titans.
Yeah, here's the thing about the Bengals defense is that they're coming in pretty banged up. I mean, they lost Larry Ojanobi. He's on IR, and he's done for the playoffs. But on top of that, Mike Daniels, Joseph Tufaro, who was out before the game last week, and Trey Hendrickson's all question marks as well. So they have a banged up defense, and they have to deal with the juggernaut. If you're an X-Men fan, and Derrick Henry coming back healthy and having a good couple months off. Now, look at the time of these injuries and the fact that the Bengals defense is so banged up. Derrick Henry has not played in 9 games and still finished in the top 10 in rushing yards, close to 1,000 yards. So I just tell you how good Derrick Henry is, but also how good he is over the course of a game. And, he averaged close to 4 yards a carry in the first 3 quarters of a game, close to 6 yards a carry in the fourth quarter of a game. And now you have a Bengals defense that's lacking some depth, that's a little beat up on the front in the front 7 that has to deal with not just slowing down Henry, but you also Foreman and Dontrell Hiller, who also combined for close to 1,000 yards on the ground in Derrick Henry's absence. But the Bengals able to do a good job of keeping the Raiders offense out of the end zone for the most part last week, but they also played with a lead. So that might be having to rely on the Bengals offense also to maybe put points on the board. So that way it takes away the Titans' ability to rely so much on the running game that they have to play from behind so much in the game. But also it takes away, they have to figure out a way to at least limit and slow down the Titans' rushing attack, because a lot of Tannehill's play action ability comes from that also. And it's going to be, it's a tough order when you don't have the manpower or you're short-handed, but also when you know that Henry's ability to wear down a defense over the course of 4 quarters, and you don't have guys who can rotate and keep fresh along that front line, it is going to be a very tough task. But part of it's going to be, can the Bengals get a lead early on and force the Titans to kind of go away from that rushing attack at some point and have to rely more on Tannehill's arm, which I think would play a little more into the Bengals secondary, which played very well last week. So it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a wait and see approach as far as what the Bengals can do and how the game is going to play out as far as what their offense is able to do as far as putting up points.
And it's funny, out of all of the things that we're talking about today, I think the Bengals defense is by far the weakest of the 16 units that we're talking about. So I'm very interested to see if the Bengals defense can match what this offense has done this year, which is outstanding. All right. Usually we kind of lie when we say we've saved the best for last, but this time I need it. The Buffalo Bills, led by a quarterback who had a dominating 5-touchdown performance last week in Josh Allen, are in an AFC Championship rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs, who are led by a quarterback who had a dominating 5-touchdown performance last week in Patrick Mahomes. Sorry, Jay. Bills won a Week 5 matchup at Arrowhead 38-20, most famous for a weather delay, and Michelle Tafoya talking about how people liked their dessert sprinkles about 70-30 during halftime in a very weird report. But that was over 3 months ago. That's how long this goddamn season is. Now, is the Bills' offense much different than it was back then? And the answer is yes, it is. Josh Allen last week. There's not enough words that you can say about what he did last week versus the New England Patriots, so I'm going to try. He is the first person in playoff history, and I think the first team in playoff or maybe even regular season history who had touchdowns on every possession, except for the last one, which ended in a kneel down, and never faced a 4th down the entire game. They only faced 6 third downs the entire game. And against a Bill Belichick coach team, never before in Belichick's history has that happened, or has it happened that situation has happened. And they never had a situation where a team hasn't punted against Bill Belichick, and the Bills did that twice in 4 weeks. So this winning streak that they are on is incredible right now. And yes, I know the higher seed goes first, but that's how much I really want to talk about the Bills team. This Bills team right now. I don't care. Anthony, get ready to go next. What Josh Allen did last week is so insane. I don't know what is going to be, is how you can stop this. This is truly going to be a last team with the ball type of game. And Devin Singletary is finally providing the rushing attack that I think this Bills team has been lacking all season long. It kind of started in the second half of that Buffalo game where Brian Daboll, possibly future Giants coach, decided, hey, running the ball is something that you can do during a game and we don't have to use Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen's legs are obviously going to be a very huge, important part of this game. He has done almost everything, did everything in that Patriots game, in the first Patriots game, which got them the game where they were hosting the wild card game. And again, Josh Allen did that. He is possibly the most dangerous weapon right now on third down because he can run for 6 or he can throw for 6. The question is, have the Chiefs adjusted to that? And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about right now. In the NFC Championship last season, Allen was kind of still learning on the job. He was blitzed 8 times, but now you're going to see a different Josh Allen. He knows how to kind of avoid the pass rush. And I don't know, this is going to be an epic type of game. I think the Bills should have no shame in losing this game if they do, because Josh Allen is not going to be the reason why they lose this game, but you have two teams who I think are playing their best ball right now. And the only reason why this matchup is happening at this point is neither team could get the job done in the regular season versus the Titans. And as much as I like the Titans, that's a goddamn shame. Okay. Sorry, I went out of order. Anthony, you're going to go next because we have to talk about the Bills defense. Anthony, the Bills defense is taking a gigantic step up from last week's opponent, Mac Jones at quarterback, to the, and you're going to like this, reigning, defending, undisputed 2-time AFC championship in Patrick Mahomes.
Look, I appreciate Paul Heyman reference, but I get one. But look, Buffalo just played. They were inspired last week. I don't know. Like I said, I did watch the Sunday NFL. The Bills were might, and that pregame speech that was given, and then you saw how the Bills came out and played. By the way, Michael Hyde's interception literally changed that entire game because New England was going in to kind of tie the game and come away with some kind of points. That interception really just kind of set the tone for what happened the rest of that game, because that was an ass whooping. If I ever saw anyone hand Bill Belichick throughout these 20 plus years, he has been a head coach in the National Football League as far as the New England Patriots concerned. I think back to the 38-20 game that the Bills won earlier this year. And Buffalo kind of forced Kansas City to try to be patient, because Kansas City's offense is as good as Patrick Mahomes is. They rely a lot on big plays, and Buffalo kind of took that away and kind of forced Patrick Mahomes to be patient, take what they're going to give him, take the short underneath stuff, and let's see it, and kind of dare Patrick Mahomes to take shots downfield, which is well the safeties, Jordan Poyer and Michael Hyde, who caught that interception that kind of turned the game around. And the nickelback, Teron Johnson, is going to play such a big factor as far as keeping guys away downfield. You think about last year's AFC Championship game, the Bills had no answer for Tyreek Hill and lost my
Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce, yes. My train of thought for a second. They had no answer for him, but also they didn't have much of a pass rush in that game also. So Patrick Mahomes had all the time in the world to find guys downfield. Going back to the regular season game, the Bills were able to get a couple of sacks and pressure Mahomes a little better. They're going to have a lot. They're going to have to need a little more. And Buffalo, this defense, they don't even have Tre'Davious White, and they've played so much better in his absence. They've allowed the lowest completion on third down percentage, which is 26% in the NFL, and the fewest passing yards per game since the injury. But they haven't played a whole lot of explosive offenses in that time frame. So this is going to be a definite challenge for them. But we've seen in the past with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, when you take away the big play downfield, that Mahomes can be a little impatient and start forcing things downfield. And I can see Buffalo kind of going to that same mentality and kind of daring Patrick Mahomes to kind of take a shot downfield and give him the underneath stuff. We've seen it kind of play and work against Kansas City's offense. It worked back in earlier this year. So I could kind of see them going to that same thing. And also, you just mentioned with Josh Allen, that offense hitting on all cylinders right now. It's going to be a day. It's going to be an issue of, is Patrick Mahomes going to feel like if the Bills are putting points up, it's going to feel like he's going to have to he's being forced to make big plays, which may actually play into what Buffalo wants to do defensively.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the Bills defense has been pretty on point this entire year. But like I said, there's going to be a lot of wide open stuff, I think, in this game. I mean, and then that being said, get ready for a 16-13 ball game. Okay. Yay. The Chiefs offense is back firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, do we have enough time to do this segment?
We might. Yeah, the Chiefs offense is back firing on all cylinders, especially if they're playing against Pittsburgh. Can Patrick finally get his Patrick Price against the Bills in this 2021 season?
The Chiefs scored so many times last week in their 42-21 wild card win over my Steelers, and in so many different ways that they ran out of the fireworks they shoot off each time.
How do you run out of fireworks after only 6 touchdowns is what I don't understand.
Go
you should be prepared for this by now.
Just saying. That dynamic, multi-dimensional, ridiculously creative Andy Reid scheme is the key for a Chiefs offense that after a slow start, including a 38-20 Week 5 loss to the Bills, wound up finishing the season ranked number 3 in defense-adjusted value over average, DVOA for short, number 2 in expected points added per play, and number 1 in success rate, the 3 key next-gen stats that the NFL uses to rate offenses. Sure, Patrick Mahomes had a Patrick Mahomes game doing Patrick Mahomes things, 30 of 39, almost 77% completion, 404 yards, over 10 yards per attempt with 5 touchdowns and 1 pick. That's a 138.2 passer rating. He carved up the Steelers' pass defense like a Thanksgiving turkey. 383 of those passing yards came after his first quarter interception, and he joined Hall of Famer Kurt Warner and former Raiders quarterback Darryl the Mad Bomber LaMonica as the only quarterbacks in NFL history to have multiple playoff games with 5 or more touchdown passes. But the reason the offense was able to do pretty much anything it wanted was because they weren't solely reliant on Mahomes to make plays. They pulled out formations and plays from the deep, dark recesses of the playbook for this game. Offensive lineman Nick Allegretti caught a touchdown pass, and tight end Travis Kelce threw a touchdown pass. Kelce also did pretty well in his day job, catching 5 balls for 108 yards and a score, and generally being the matchup nightmare for Pittsburgh that I said he'd be on our last show. Those 108 yards, by the way, gave Kelce his 7th postseason game with at least 100 yards receiving. That's second most in league history behind who? Anybody care to take a guess? Behind who? Anybody? Bueller? Jerry Rice. Come on. The guy has 800-yard games. Kelce also became the first player in league history to catch a touchdown, have 100 or more yards receiving, and throw a touchdown in a single postseason game. Yeah, wide receiver Tyreek Hill was kind of quiet. 5 catches for only 57 yards. Though he did get into the end zone. But then again, I mean, who didn't for KC in that game? But fellow wide receivers Byron Pringle, McCall Hardman, and Demarcus Robinson chipped in. They combined for 156 yards on 13 catches and 2 scores, both by Pringle. But the surprise contributor was running back Jerick McKinnon, who had his best game of the season, giving them 61 yards on the ground on 12 carries. That's 5.2 yards a carry, 81 yards in the air on 6 catches, 13.5 per catch. The 142 yards from scrimmage were a postseason career high for the 8-year vet, and it was the type of multidimensional output from the running back position they really haven't had all season. Now, the Chiefs are hopeful that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who has no injury designation this week, and Darrell Williams, who's questionable, will be able to line up at running back against the Bills, though Andy Reid has said that didn't say that either one of them would resume their previous place on the depth chart. McKinnon seems to have earned Reid's confidence on top of his ability to make plays in both the passing and rushing games, he's a willing blocker on blitz pickup. And if he can give them similar output to what the Chiefs got from Damian Williams during the 2019 Super Bowl winning run, 290 all-purpose yards and 6 touchdowns in 3 postseason games, and Patrick Mahomes has a Patrick Mahomes game and does Patrick Mahomes things, then this offense will have a very good chance at avenging that Week 5 loss to Buffalo, no matter how good the Bills are at circling the wagons.
I will say, great. I will say this though.
Come on, I can't.
I got it. That you know, I'm not the greatest cliche person. All I'm going to say is this: that Week 5 matchup, and almost all of these rematches were Week 3 or Week 5. Throw them out the window. That's all I'm going to say. You could only just take that for a viewpoint because everything has been different between both of these teams since then. The Bills have gone through a lot of peaks and valleys. Joe, make no mistake about this. The Chiefs are hosting this game based on their second half of the season defensive performance, but that performance in the first half of the season can have that Week 5 game as Exhibit A. The Bills are led by the apparent modern day Michael Vick or Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. So how can the defense stop him?
I don't know if they do. This is a tough task for them. They're going to have to, because, I'm not sure where Josh Allen is in his development as far as not being fooled by anything. But after the way he went up against the Bill Belichick defense, you have to imagine that he's not an easy guy to confuse. And as well as the Chiefs defense has played, they actually finished up number 10 in the league in defense. Of course, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 playoff teams in front of them. So for all of my under 30 crowd of sports writers, defense still matters. They did only have 31 sacks. They had 66 completion percentage against them at 7.3 yards per attempt. I mean, this is a nightmare waiting to happen. If they can't figure out a way to get a little bit more pressure on Allen, if they can keep him in front of him so that he doesn't do his Superman act as we did last week, as we sort of predicted and look forward to, that he can run at any time and run well and knock people over and not just scramble around, but be able to actually get positive yards on his scrambles and his runs, his designed runs. I think the Chiefs defense could be in for a long day. I think that front 7 is much better. I think Clark is really good at rushing the passer, but again, all of this stuff is obvious. Spagnuolo's going to have to go into his little bag of tricks that he used to confuse even the great Tom Brady at the time in 2011 to try to show some things and back out of him and get him to do things he doesn't want to do. But I'm thinking Allen is almost past that point at this thing where he can read those defenses. He can see the things they use enough motions. They have enough weapons in there to move around that they can read the defense pre-snap. He usually gets to the ball quick enough to do those types of things. So as much as I want to say that there's some validity to a top 10 defense, I'm sitting here looking at these two offenses and saying, let's just get your popcorn out and hope for 49-48 and see where it goes and have some fun, because I don't think either of these teams is going to punt the ball tonight. You may go a long time in any bad situations. I think it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be fun, but I don't see a lot of positivity for a Chiefs defense that really, really has to come up with either a great game plan or get some luck, or have Josh have one of his off nights that he has every 6 weeks or so. And that could certainly happen. The same thing could happen again to Mahomes. He could get a little hero thing going too, but he's got so many weapons, it's scary. And as Eli said, I'm not sure the Chiefs run plays. They just call it recess and go run around and I'll find you.
And it's worked for 2 consecutive AFC championships, by the way, because
exactly what it looks like, and it works. So
I will say this: Josh Allen, 9-6, Bills Jaguars wasn't that long ago. So the off night can really be an off night. Like I said, expect 16-13 the way we're talking right now.
Exactly.
Guys, outside of I'm pretty sure it won't be, but watch. Outside of the New York Giants, who we talked about a week ago, there are coaching vacancies to fill. We have some ones that we knew November would be open: the Broncos, the Bears, and the Jaguars. And then there are some that we were a little surprised that opened up. The Vikings, the Dolphins, and technically the Raiders. They are looking to be shopping after firing GM Mike Mayock this week. That's a damn shame because Rich Bisaccia literally wrote thank you notes to his team for the season that they had. And I feel like the team really would want to play for him. So, of course, let's go after Josh McDaniels. Anyway, who's the prize of this vacant head coaching team search? Again, we're leaving the Giants out of this. Anthony, start with your winner.
Well, for me, it'll be the Jacksonville Jaguars. But outside the obvious all elite wrestler references and
Lord,
being all elite.
now I know why you picked.
Hey, you threw in a Paul Heyman reference. I could throw in a Tony Khan reference at some point, okay? But look, whoever comes into this coaching job is going to get the number one pick for the second year in a row, and obviously a franchise quarterback and Trevor Lawrence. But I would assume it's going to be an offensive mind that's going to take this job because you think about the development of Trevor Lawrence being such a key part in Jacksonville turning around that force. Look, you can't go Basolo. I mean, Urban Meyer just turned this entire team and culture into such a sideshow that actual clowns, people dressed up in clown makeup, went to the season finale against Indianapolis. And look, the way the Jaguars played that afternoon and kind of torpedoing the Colts postseason hopes, maybe they should encourage that every Sunday going forward next season for home games. But you think about Trevor Lawrence play under Urban Meyer, 12 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, 3,600 yards passing, and just a completion percentage of 59% as opposed to after the firing and having more of an 81% completion percentage, of course, more of a simplified dink and dunk offense to go with 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. It is going to be not just the development of Trevor Lawrence, but also building around him as well. I mean, a terrible offensive line has got to be revamped. The defense on the other side has got to be done. It's pretty much like the Jaguars. It's a special team all over again. You kind of feel like that. But the luxury is you having an owner in Shad Khan who will open up the wallets, who will give you the financial resources to go out and do what you need to do. It's just that Urban Meyer was just so bad and so embarrassing at some time at points that even a owner with Shad Khan's patience were very thin. So you're going to have a patient, very financially generous owner in your back pocket. And also the fact that the Jaguars really in the last decade has only had one winning season. So it's not a whole lot of, it's not like the Giants where you have the historically good franchise that's fallen on hard times to kind of deal with. You have a coaching scenario where you're not just building up a roster, but you get a chance to kind of put a culture in of your own choosing and liking and can go from the ground up. So this is a great opportunity. It's just the fact that Urban Meyer's stench is going to have to leave the presence. It's going to have to leave the facility a little bit before you can move forward.
I feel like we're just in a reset mode now all of a sudden. Be like, oh yeah, Jaguars, great. Trevor Lawrence, quarterback of the future. How much is Trevor Lawrence? I mean, Urban had a horrible year, but Lawrence was no picnic either. It seems, but it does seem a lot like Peyton Manning year 1. So that'll be very interesting to see how year 2 is. It's a very winnable division in my book, especially if Carson Wentz is still in there. All right, Jay, pick your winner.
For me, it's the Vikings. And I was reading Mike Sando's Pick 6 column in The Athletic, and he based his attractiveness ratings of these 8 openings on some input from 5 NFL executives and coaches, and the criteria that they used considered, what they considered most important. Some of those criteria mirror my own. But the fact that they consider ownership the number one criteria was interesting to me. The feeling was that a neutral owner, one who is neither good nor bad, was the same as a good one because both types would provide the requisite support without interfering too much or doing too much damage. My number one criteria is quarterback, which is no surprise to anyone on this panel or who has watched this show at any point, followed by the level of playmakers on each side of the ball. The quarterback situation was among the criteria these 5 guys used, along with the state of the roster, which equates to somewhat to my playmakers criteria. But they also used franchise tradition and history in the GM situation. Salary cap flexibility as well as draft capital were included, but considered lesser criteria. Based on that, the article ranked the Broncos, the Vikings, and the Raiders as the top 3 openings that give a new head coach the best chance of success. And with all that as preamble, let me state the Vikings were my pick even before I read the article. All that article did was back up my choice with some insider information that I didn't previously have. Now, the case can be made that the Raiders have the better quarterback situation with Derek Carr compared to Kirk Cousins, but their 2021 numbers are similar, and Cousins is less likely to turn the ball over. Is he ever going to be a tier 1 franchise quarterback? Probably not. At this point, he is who he is, and you know exactly what you'll get from him. But he is a competent enough starter to get you to the playoffs, especially with the weapons at his disposal. And I like the Vikings set of offensive playmakers, headlined by do-it-all running back Dalvin Cook and wide receivers Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and underrated tight end Tyler Conklin. Team was second in the NFL in sacks with 51, and they did that without reliance on 1 or 2 guys. No one had double digits in sack totals. And while they were in the middle of the pack towards the bottom of the pack in a lot of other team defensive stats, which is a big red flag with a supposed defensive guru like former coach Mike Zimmer, they have some good pieces in place in defensive end Daniel Hunter, linebacker Eric Kendricks, and strong safety Harrison Smith, and cornerback Patrick Peterson. The ownership, which those 5 NFL executives and coaches rated as neutral, has shown patience, giving the coaching staff and front office time and latitude to build the roster. They let football people make football decisions, which is something I have always been big on. And while Green Bay is likely to be the king in the North as long as Aaron Rodgers is there, the rest of that division is pretty weak. So getting in as a wild card is very much possible. What will be interesting to see is who gets hired as GM. That spot is open as well, and how that determines who the next coach will be. But whomever those gentlemen are, they're going to be coming into a pretty decent situation. Not much needs to be done to get the Vikings back into the playoffs next year.
Well, the one thing that needs to be done is the winning mentality. This is a team with all this talent that hasn't been over 500 for 2 seasons.
And that's where the new administration comes in, Rabbi. The big thing for them will be, rebuilding a culture that seems to have gotten in a locker room that seems to have gotten toxic this past year with Mike Zimmer.
Joe, considering your love of Ohio State alums, especially at quarterback, I'm shocked at your Bears pick.
I got to go last. What can I tell you? It's funny because I'm going to say this about, I have positives about it because I did think about it, the choice a little bit, but I have one big negative about the whole situation is they're hiring both the general manager and coach, but they're doing it simultaneously. They're interviewing head coaches while they're interviewing GM candidates. I think it's the reason the guy from Indianapolis said, I don't want to be the GM, because he wants to be able to pick his coach because they're going to live and die together. So you can't go into this situation. Again, we'll talk about the Giants later, but separate it. Do one, let the other guy run the thing and do it separate. So I hate the way Chicago's going about it. The only job is you have the number 2 defense in the league. Okay. They're very good. They have a lot of still studs there. They could go the other direction, trade some of those guys. They could get some draft picks. They should do a lot of different things with that defense. And then unlike an aging bad Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, you at least have a kid that showed a little bit last year. And again, rookie quarterback, so he didn't play a lot of games. He got hurt. As we always say, rookies get hurt. But he got to learn a little bit from Dalton. He got to learn a little bit from Foles. Don't forget, the head coach was tied to the whole disaster of moving up in the draft ahead of Patrick Mahomes to pick Trubisky. That whole disaster. He was going to be the savior. He was going to be the offensive genius of the NFL, which he wasn't. So the fact that no matter how well they played or didn't play. And so you get a position there that has a young quarterback that could probably be fairly good as long as he gets some tutelage there. They pick a good offensive coordinator, get a good quarterbacks coach that teaches them when to run, when not to run, And, as Jay always says, you have to look at what good things did he do in his first year. And he did show some promise. He brought them back in a couple of games to win some games. So he's got that mentality. He's got that winner's thing. He seems to be like a hardworking person. I think there's a positive there. Again, at least he's in year 2. You're not looking at, again, a Cousins in year 12 where you're only going to, even if he's good, you're only going to have him for another couple of years, and you're going to have to. And there aren't a lot of quarterbacks coming out, by the way. I'm sure we'll talk about this around draft time with what are the Steelers going to do with Dwayne Haskins and the other kid, Mason Rudolph on the roster. You're going to have to go out and find somebody or live with what you have. So I think that the Chicago job isn't bad for that reason, because you have the number 2 defense in the league, and you have a young quarterback that you can certainly build around. You have the running back that's not bad. You have a couple of pieces there. What I don't like is ownership and the way that they're going about the search, because you could wind up with 2 guys who hate each other, and that's not going to be a comfortable thing. And again, I think you would rather do it one at a time, but it depends on early enough. They fired Nagy before the end of the season, right? The week before. You could have started and had the list of names. John, we always make fun of John Mara saying, I have a list of names in my desk drawer, and I'm sure it's handwritten, of guys around the league that we're looking towards in case something ever happens. I don't think Chicago had that.
By the way, they did fire Nagy actually right at the end of the season. They probably should have fired him during the season. They
knew that they were going to, right?
They knew that they were going to, absolutely. But I honestly, if I were to say this, I would have honestly, if I didn't have to pick, I would go option G, none of the above, because I think all of these organizations are kind of been middling for years. The only one that's been tough is the Vikings, but I came to the conclusion I think it's the Broncos for a bunch of reasons. Number one of these days, John Elway is going to get it right in terms of developing quarterback in season, or he's going to get someone in free agency. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is walking through that door, but if he can get somebody who's competent enough, didn't have Teddy Bridgewater the entire season after the injury where he got knocked out, I believe, against the Raiders or the Broncos. He had Drew Lock, and Drew Lock is not anywhere near capable to being a starting quarterback. He's barely a replacement quarterback in my book. Defense, though, great defense. They were able to have the adjustment to let Von Miller go to Los Angeles. They were third in points allowed, 322, 36 touchdowns allowed, only 31 against the defense. And there was only one team that was better in defensive points allowed, and that was the Patriots, who had a very good defense this year. They were third in points allowed. But they were only, even though they were only 20th in overall DVOA on defense, this team is a lot better defensively than most other teams. But then you're like, okay, so the offense wasn't that good. The only problem they really have is the quarterback. Their running game was finally brought together this year with Melvin Gordon having a pretty good season, and then Javonte Williams. They broke 180 tackles this season, and Javonte Williams personally cost me a fantasy football week. We won't get into that now, but Javonte Williams is a perfect all-purpose back himself. Then you have wide receivers. You have a trio of wide receivers who's in your fold for a long time. Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, and Jerry Jeudy. All of them have first-round talent ability. Jeudy was picked in the first round. They assigned Sutton to a, I think, 4-year extension. And Tim Patrick is your perfect possession wide receiver. They just need the quarterback to put it all together. Only they had, I know Elway's not general manager anymore, and someone is making the decisions for him. But if you have one of the world's greatest quarterbacks of all time in your organization as team president, you're eventually going to have to get it right at the quarterback position, right? And that's all they're missing. Denver was a playoff team for a good amount of the year. And yes, I am putting them in the AFC West, which is a very tough division. Las Vegas is going to improve, and one of these days, Brandon Staley will not go for it on a ridiculous down. And Kansas City is Kansas City. But again, there are 7 playoff teams in each division. If Philadelphia and Pittsburgh could have made the playoffs this year, anybody could make the playoffs next year. Just saying. All right.
Yeah. Rabbi, what's interesting to me is you look at the 4 choices we all made. I think the Bears are the one where, if you look at the ownership criteria, that's a definitive negative. Under the Mrs. McCaskey, who's I believe it's Hallis's granddaughter, Joe.
Yes,
I believe
Virginia McCaskey. Yes.
Yeah, they have been one of the most dysfunctional organizations for a very, very long time. So the fact that they're doing things Bass Ackwards is no surprise for me. I hope that whoever they bring in is someone who knows how to work with a quarterback, because Joe, I agree with you. Fields has a chance to be a decent quarterback in this league. The problem is that he gets painted and tarred and feathered with the same brush that previous Ohio State quarterbacks have been, who have flamed out in the NFL. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle their business.
Yeah, that is.
Speaking of handling business.
Well, yes. Speaking of good owners, if you're watching this show and are saying, hey, we should talk about the Giants since they've already made a hire, Steven, well, you took the words right out of my mouth. Joe Schoen, former Bills assistant GM and a man who has been in the NFL in various jobs for 20 years, and he is only 42, is taking over the New York Giants as general manager, the first person outside of George Young to be an outsider to actually become the general manager of this organization. Joe, Shane is already hitting the ground running. He interviewed Brian Daboll and Leslie Frazier yesterday before the Bills went into their playoff game. There's a lot of things that he's going to have to do, but is he the right person to lead this process? You know, a wise man named Sam told me to trust the process once. Is Mr. Shane ready?
Well done, Rabbi.
Yeah, I do. And I think that, and again, John actually must have had his list, and he was at the top of the list. Knew from years back. You've said he's been around. And again, I said this to you yesterday, Rabbi, when we were texting back and forth. You know, this is a guy who started out in the ticket office in Carolina, you know, as a kid, 18 years old. You knew, so he loves football. He wanted to be around. He knew what he wanted to do. He was then hired by Parcells when he was running the Miami Dolphins. So he has a little bit of that background to him. You know, Parcells would be in somebody's ear there telling you how good a person he is. Again, I think that's why he gets on that little piece of paper in John Mara's desk. And then they have the interviews and they bring him back. And I think it was obvious it was him or the guy from Kansas City, maybe. But I think if Shane wanted it and he showed that he had that, everything that people talked about. But what I said also had to be true. They were going to go out of the organization. They weren't going to just take Abrams and make him the GM and go from there. There was too much talk around the Giants of everything being in-house, inside, kept to the family. There's been a lot of talk about what does Chris Mara do? What does this person do? So I think it was smart. You know, George Young was thrust upon them by the NFL because the two Mara brothers couldn't agree to it, couldn't talk to each other. So they had to put somebody in between. So I think that this is a good move, again, to go outside, to look to an organization that was in dire straits. They brought him in and his GM above him and turned the organization completely around. And the other thing that's really good about, that's important about the Giant organization is, if you noticed in all the press releases, they said he met with Steve Tisch, John Mara, Chris Mara, and then met with other personnel in the building. He doesn't have to hire security guys. He doesn't have to hire media people. He doesn't have to hire secretaries. He doesn't have to hire. They're all there and they're all staying there. He's joining a family that never changes. You know, Pat Hanlon's not going anywhere because they're bringing in a new GM or a new head coach that's going to sweep everybody out of the building like they do in Jetland. You're going to walk into a system that he can just go ahead and do his job, which is what he did, right? He got hired on Thursday and was doing coach. Again, doing it the right way, where you hired the general manager and you said he will lead the search for a head coach, which means John will sit in and Steve will sit in on the second round of interview if there is a second round. And they will go through, right now he's being vetted by, you know, NFL security and the Giant security to make sure everything's up and up on all the coaches that they bring in. They obviously have to go through a process, which I guess they've already satisfied by bringing in Leslie Frazier. There's certain things that have to be followed. He's going to do it right, but he's going to do it quickly. And you see these other teams now looking for GMs, and some of them not even getting to their second interviews yet. And the Giants are already there. And people are like, oh, you have to let go of this guy and get him. Why didn't you get rid of him 4 weeks early? And as John said, you can't talk to anybody anyway before the end of the season. So, you know, except for and except for guys who aren't,
Who aren't
Correct.
saddled with teams, you can bring them in early if you want to.
and even, I know you're not a Dan Quinn fan, but again, they said, look, some of the guys who we talked to wanted to speak with him. So why not put the slip in that says we want permission to talk to him? They don't have to do that with Flores because he's been fired. He's not under another team. So there's a lot of guys out there. There's also a lot of assistants that came out this week too, where there's guys are going to start getting released. Wink Martindale got fired.
Yep.
Maybe Patrick Graham gets moved up. We don't know. They said they are going to interview Patrick, which is nice.
Also,
Again, I don't think they,
by the way.
Yeah, I don't think they stay in-house there. I'm not sure that that's the whole thing. I think he stays maybe if they bring Flores in, but that's all going to shake out in the thing. But I do like the fact that the guy came in, he signed his contract right after the second interview. They offered him the job. He didn't leave the building and do all that stuff, didn't go anywhere else. He wanted the job. He likes the organization. And the next morning, he had 2 interviews set up for, again, his local guys, which I don't think, I think guys jump to conclusions too quickly. When they hired Gettleman, the next day, there was an article that said, Steve Wilkes is obviously going to be the choice for head coach. Who's coaching it? Defensive coordinator at Liberty. He's not even in the NFL anymore. But again, guys take those easy jumps to, it's going to be Dabble. It's going to be Leslie Frazier. It's blah, blah, blah. They're going to go through the process just like they went through the process for GM. And I'm fairly, confident that they'll come up at least with a similar philosophy throughout the organization and go forward from there.
I will say this, what the Giants have done in terms of the rumors of it when everything was going down with the judge firing, it's like, oh no, it's gonna want to interview with the Giants. There are 2 organizations out there who have class in their ownership. One is the Steelers and the other is the Giants. As much as they might look like a clusterfuck, they're really good and organized really well. And that's why 10 days after they fired Joe Judge, they got their general manager, which is very impressive.
Yeah, and Rabbi, and I refer to this, back and forth, and there are a lot there. I know I've said it on this show, and there are still people I talk to who are like surprised when I say it. The Steelers and the Giants are 2 organizations that are joined by marriage. So it's kind of interesting that they seem to follow similar paths. Me personally, I like the hire. Shane has the resume, and according to those who would know, he has the chops. He was the first candidate interviewed last week and the first finalist interviewed, further cementing the perception that the former right-hand man to Bills GM Brandon Beane since 2017 was the favorite for the position. Hiring Shane, someone he's known, that Beane has known since they worked together in Carolina and has been tight with for decades. He was Beane's first move as GM of the Bills was to hire him, and he's relied on Shane as one of the most trusted voices in personnel moves. Shane has a scouting background, got his start as a scouting assistant with the Panthers. He was there from 01 to 07, continued in that role with the Dolphins from 08 to 17, rising to the position of assistant director of college scouting before becoming director of player personnel. You guys mentioned Bill Parcells. He actually endorsed Shane for the job, having, as Joe said, hired him when Parcells was running the ship in Miami. As Bill's assistant GM, Shane and Beane instituted a draft grading system for their new scouting staff and created an analytics department that has become one of the most respected in the league. Shane also went on the road to scout some of the biggest prospects that the Bills eventually drafted, both by himself and with Beane. Shane was also in the inner circle of the franchise-defining quarterback search in 2018 that ultimately led to the Bills drafting Josh Allen. And Rabbi has said, talked plenty of how well that's turned out. The take from sources inside the Bills facility is Shane is one of the most respected and well-liked people in the organization. He communicates very well. He's a great organizer with excellent interpersonal skills. And his rise from NFL outsider to assistant GM was made through a very solid work ethic. What will start setting the Twitterverse on fire now that Shane has been hired is something you guys alluded to. Does that mean that Bills offensive coordinator Brian Daboll, who the Giants interviewed Friday night, and will be likely be very much in demand for some of the other current head coach openings, is he now a lead pipe lock to be Joe Judge's successor? Daboll's work with Josh Allen will have Giants fans and media salivating at the possibilities of what he could do for Daniel Jones. The Bills have become a solid organization thanks to Beane and head coach Sean McDermott. So anyone coming from it has the type of background and experience that I think warrants the opportunity that the Giants are giving Joe Schoen. He's got a tough job ahead of him, but if ownership gives him the power and latitude, and most importantly, the time, I think he'll at least have a chance to turn the Giants around.
I will say this very quickly about Daboll, and me and Joe were talking about it beforehand. Daboll's done a really good job in Buffalo. Daboll has not done a very good job everywhere else. That's all I'm going to say, and we'll see what happens over the next few weeks. Doesn't mean it's a lead pipe lock in any way, shape, or form. As
no, Rabbi, I just said that's where
I didn't want to mention about that, but considering that's going to be the talk all week, and God knows they might have a hiring by this time next week that we'll talk about.
Who knows?
That's my initial opinion. Anthony, take us home.
Yeah, I like the hire, and for two reasons. One, I like the fact that it's an outside the organizational thing. I think the Giants, the last several years, has kind of needed a new, fresh approach. I know the Giants, the Maras, and the Tish, for what it's worth, is known to really keep things in-house. They are a family dynamic as far as the organization, the ownership is concerned. So going outside the organization for maybe a fresh face, a fresh approach to building a football team, I think it's a good start. But then you don't have to look far. I mean, look at where the Bills were before Shane's arrival from Miami, and obviously he's been in the league 20 years. The Buffalo Bills have missed the playoffs for 17 of those 20 years that Shane been in the NFL. And now we look at it like this. They've been in the playoffs for the last 5 seasons and are a game away from a back-to-back AFC Championship game appearance as far as back-to-back division titles. So the Buffalo Bills have come a very, very long way the last 5 years with Shane being part of that organization. You talked about being his scouting background, not just Josh Allen. You're talking about Stephon Diggs. You're talking about Devin Singletary. You're talking about Dawson Knox, a tight end. Tremont Edmonds, Michael Hyde, Jordan Porter, Trey Davis White, guys have been very important to the Bills' success, particularly the last 2 seasons. It's going from a doormat team to an also ran to now a popular Super Bowl pick. I actually picked them to get to the Super Bowl at the during our preview show last September. Wow. So here's and Joe. Well, look. Shane, I think, like I said, I like the fact that he's opening up the coaching interviews, not just guys he knows, but obviously they contacted Brian Flores. I grew up with Flores, grew up in both in Brownsville, with the same grade school and everything. So obviously I'm a little favoritism towards that, but I can see well, they want to go through every nook and cranny before they make a final decision, because I do think what's going to happen with the quarterback situation, Daniel Jones, like even what's going to happen with Saquon Barkley, what kind of approach they're going to have defensively if Patrick Graham does not come back or he's not the head coach, but that matters. So there's a lot of things that he's going to have to take into consideration as far as making a final decision on head coach, and it's going to be okay. If I pick this head coach, which direction is the team going to go moving forward? Not just as far as a personnel thing, as also just as far as the culture, the dynamic. There was a lot of things that was a factor in Joe Judge's firing. Some of it was the play, just losing the locker room. It's the guy I bring in. Can he keep the locker room in tough times? And we saw that was Joe Judge's downfall. Moving forward, it's going to be a lot of things that it's going to be a huge checklist that he's going to have to go over as far as who's going to be the next head coach and the New York Giants, and can he take them forward, because we can't be going through this every 2 years and bringing in a new head coach. It's got to be some stability. That's got to be there at the leadership role, and that's going to be another big factor as far as who becomes the next head coach moving forward.
Yeah, amen to that. All right. Unfortunately, we can't go any further because we actually have to start watching these games. For Meatloaf, Louis Anderson, and Clark Gillies, the worst trio of deaths that we've had in one day in a while.
Yes,
unbelievable. All of them. This has been on the Sports Lines. Once again, a special thanks to Joe Tufaro for joining us. As always, his new account that he is contributing to is A, countable reps. That is uppercase A, lowercase c, count in all capitals, able reps with the R in capitals. Retweet it. They are going to be online all weekend talking about all of the games that are going on. It would be really nice to see this kind of flourish, and it has flourished already over the last few weeks. And any Twitter feed that has a How I Met Your Mother reference about Marshall's love of charts is all right by me. So good job to that. So we'll be talking a lot about that. And Joe, I'm sure we have one or two more football shows left to do. We have conference championships and the Super Bowl coming up. So we have a lot of ways. By the way, two of our Super Bowls is definitely going to be done this weekend because the Bills and the Chiefs are playing each other. So I love Josh Allen, but for the sake of my picks, let's go Chiefs. All right. For the other two over here, Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Stephen Rabinowitz. Let's go this fast so we can split. Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines Live, YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines On Demand, and
on Twitter at ONTH Sportslines, where you'll see the link to this show in about an hour or so, hopefully, as well as other interesting sports tidbits that we think you'll find worth a read.
Again, this weekend, retweet accountable refs and get those followers up. They are growing this, and it's looking pretty good. And Jay loves stats, so it's always good to see a stat thing kind of.
Yep.
My name is Stephen Rabinowitz, and like a bat out of hell, we're out of here. This has been On the Sports Lines. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Enjoy the game,
everyone.
everybody.
Very good.